Hey guys, it's Monica at Academic Phoenix Plus, and welcome to an Introduction to Texturing tutorial. This is a fundamental lesson on how to put a texture on something like a cube. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with just a basic cube. So up over here at the top, there's a little polygon tab. You can click on this cube and you'll get a cube. Let's bring it up and then let's go ahead and scale. Just because it's always nice to see it bigger. Let's delete the history by clicking on this little guy right here, which will remove the inputs, and also freeze the transformations, which will zero all of this out except for scale, which will keep it at 1. Again, this is going to be a fundamental lesson on how to texture an object. We are going to be texturing this cube so that it looks like a crate. It's pretty amazing because what we're going to be doing is taking a 3D object, laying it out flat so that we can draw on it in a 2D software such as Photoshop so that it looks like something. Right now, it just looks like a very boring cube, and we're going to make something really cool out of it. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at our UVs. So right now, we just have faces, edges, and vertices, but there's also a fourth channel, which is called UVs, and you can go up here to the top under UVs and go to UV Editor. Again, if you don't see that, it's probably because you're in the wrong pull-down menu. So make sure that you are not in rigging, not in animation, but in modeling. So this is a UV editor. This is a 2D representation of our 3D model. Just trying to scoot it over here. And as you'll notice, when I click on it, you're going to get this really interesting grid. This grid is basically just like a basic texture. It's just showing you like, hey, look, this, if you put a texture that's a bunch of squares, you will actually get a bunch of squares on your map, on your 3D model. So that's wonderful. That's exactly what we want. We also see text. This text is also very helpful because text and numbers. This is very important because it will tell us, are my textures upside down? This is very important information because if I'm trying to texture something, that means this is going to be upside down as well. So keep that in mind. Now I could rotate, my mesh so it looks straight, but at the same time, the 0, 0 is probably up as well. So this gives us a little bit of an idea of what the texture is going to look like when we create, when we bring in our own. Over here in the UV editor, we have this checker right here. We can turn it on and off so you don't have to get blinded by this incredible texture. When I turn this off, you'll notice that there is a 0 to 1, 0 to 1. This is considered the UV space. You want all of your UVs to be inside the 0 to 1 space. If I scroll out, you are going to notice that there is a lot of space. Now, this is helpful because that means I can move things around if I need to. But right now, this is perfect where it is at 0 to 1. This is the default UV set of this cube, of any cube. Now it's a little hard, as you'll notice, I'm trying to move my windows around. So I'm going to close this and instead I'm going to go to my workspace and go to UV editing. This is going to help me a lot because my UV editor is going to be right here. And my tools called the UV toolkit is available on the right. So the purpose of UVs is, as we mentioned before, that this is a 2D representation of the cube. So when I click on a face, you'll notice that this face gets highlighted. If I click on this face, that face gets highlighted. So what that tells me is that if I wanted to texture something specifically on this face, I have to make sure that I select that I paint something in here. What's cool about the UV editor is that you can actually select faces here. So if you have no clue where any of this is located, you can always click on it. Again, you can right click, go to face, click on it, and then you'll notice that this is at the bottom. So there's two ways to find out which face goes to what UV set. Why is this called UV? Usually in a graph, it's X and Y, but we already have X and Y. It's our coordinate system, right? So if I go to my attribute channels and to my channel box, we have already X, Y, and Z. So they couldn't possibly call this X and Y, so they call it U and V. So that's one of the reasons why. If I right click on this object in my UV editor and I go to UV, I can actually select a UV. So each UV represents a vertex. However, what's interesting is that this vertex here Or for example, if I grab a vertex and select it, you'll notice that it selects 2 UVs. That's because this UV and that UV is actually the same space. Same thing with edge. If I select this edge, you'll notice that this edge and this edge actually are the same edge on the 3D model. This outline around the object is called a seam. A seam is the place where basically you have to disconnect it or cut it so that it doesn't stretch your textures. So this is the best way to show off your textures, and unfortunately that means to separate those edges. So it is part of UV mapping. It's something that you kind of have to keep in mind about when you start UV mapping a more complicated object, but in this case we're going to be okay because this is going to be a crate. All right, so now that we understand the 0 to 1 space on the UV map, let's go ahead and export it. We need to take this image or this UV shell and export it into a file that we can use. So we are going to go up here to our image and we're going to scroll down and we're going to go to UV snapshot. Again, this is in your UV editor. Image, UV snapshot. Now, this is actually very important. There's something that I haven't done yet. It is, where is this project going to? Right now, usually the default is to go to a default Maya scene. However, I need to set my project or create a project so that we know exactly where this is going to be located. Now, this is something that I hope that in Introduction to 3D Modeling, they taught you. If they have not taught you, shame on them. But it's really a cardinal rule to be able to create a project folder. Maya will do this for us. Thank you, Maya. File, project window, click new, this little button right here, and I'm going to call this crate. You can call it whatever you like, but in this case, I'm making a crate, so this makes a lot of sense. Then I'm going to click on this little folder. I'm going to look for, whoops, did not mean to click that. I'm going to look for a place to find it. I actually have a folder called 3D Projects. So what I'm going to do is select my 3D projects and then click Select. So what it's going to do is create a project called Crate, and then it's going to place it in 3D Projects. All of this is default, accept, and let's take a look at what it made. Going into 3D Projects, let's go into Crate. Notice that my folder's right here, Crate. And then you can see that it's got several folders. One of them is called Scenes. Another one is called Source Images. And other one is called Images. There's a lot more folders, but those are the 3 we really want. Why is this important? Well, what's going on is that Maya really needs to know where it's going to export files, where is it going to save its files. It has to have a place for everything. Now, you could just have it in one folder and just have all your projects there, but if you're creating like hundreds and thousands of assets, like I actually have a ton of projects. I can't imagine having all of it in one folder. So for example, my Calico character has a set of folders. If I wanted to do a building, it would have its own folders. This is just a way that Maya knows exactly where to find its scenes, where to find its UVs, where to export anything. It just knows exactly where to find based on the project that you just created. So let's go ahead and file, save as. File, save scene as. And here's my point. You'll notice that it says 3D Projects, Crate, Scenes. Your Maya scenes will always be found in here. Crate, 01 underscore start texture or start UV, and we're in a good place. Usually Maya binary file type, there's 2. There's Maya binary, which basically works really well with the current Maya 2020 in this case. ASCII files is a little bit bigger file, but it can be opened in previous versions. So I usually have a tendency to stick to Maya ASCII files. And let's take a look at our crate folder. Whoops. Crate, scenes, and there you go. So anybody that opens up my crate folder, let's say I zip this up and send it to somebody, they will know that my Maya files will be found under scenes. So going back to this, now that we've have a project, let's go ahead and export this UV. I'm going to go to Image, UV Snapshot, just like we did before. And this time I'm going to Browse. And if it doesn't take me to the Images folder of my scene, for example, this is taking me somewhere else, just go over here to the left and you can click on Images. Images is usually the area that Maya exports any type of files. So for example, if you're trying to render out an animation, it will always put it under images. If it's trying to do a UV snapshot, for example, which is what we're doing here, we're going to place it in images. So I'm going to call this crate underscore UV snap. So again, I try to use naming conventions that make a lot of sense because I really want to make sure if anybody opens this file up, they will know exactly what this is. This is an image of a UV snap of the crate. Simple, to the point. Over here under image format, the default is an if, which is kind of Maya's file, which I think it's kind of interesting. I'm going to choose a TIFF. Now, of course, you can use PNG, you can use Targas, whichever you want, but TIFF is a really good animation format. File size, we'll talk about file size, but right now I'm going to use 1024, which is it's called a 1K map. So computers basically read files that are in the powers of 2 a lot faster than anything else. So we try to stick to the powers of 2. So that's 2, 4, 16, so on, so on, so on, so on. When we talk about textures, 1K map stands for 1024. So when the industry says, okay, I just need a 1K map, they don't actually mean 1,000 pixels. What they actually mean is 1024, 1,024 pixels. If they say a 2K map, they actually mean 2048. And if they say there's no 3K, you double the number, right? So if they want a 4K map, it's 4096. 4K maps are really high, so let's go ahead and do 1024. This is a TIFF, and apply and close. Doesn't look like much happened, but what happened, let's go over here. If we go into our images, you will discover the Crate UV map. And now we are ready for Photoshop. So let's go ahead and turn on Photoshop. All right, I've opened up the file in Photoshop, and here we have our map. Right now it's in layer 0, can't see anything. I'm going to create a new layer at the bottom right by clicking on this little piece of paper and dragging this new layer down below. And I'm going to fill it with black. So right now my top swatch is black. I'm going to do a shift backspace. I'm all about shortcuts. Make sure this says foreground, click OK. And now I have my black background and my UV snap. I'm going to go ahead and call my layer 0. In this case, UV snap, because I don't want to get confused. And we are ready to kind of explore what this does. Now, the last thing I want to do is accidentally paint on my UV snap. So I'm going to click on this little lock. That means that this layer is locked and I can't paint on it, which is ideal. Let's go ahead and create another layer. This is going to be the one that I'm going to bring in. I'm going to grab a paintbrush, choose a color, and I'm just going to make a random shape, like a smiley face. Weep. And maybe somewhere else, I'll make a frowny face. This is outside the UV space. Anything that happens inside the UV space, you'll be able to see. Anything outside the UV space, you will not be able to see, and therefore is considered a waste of memory and data. So I'm just going to show you as an example that here's an angry face outside of the UV space and here's a happy face. And just for fun, because after all, we're texturing here, let's create some cute little icons here. Just to kind of demonstrate the whole thing. Now, we don't want to save over this Crate UV snap. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Crate CLR, which stands for color. Usually you have, what we're creating today is a color map. So we want to make sure that people it's just the basic color map. We are going to change this into a PSD because it's a working file and I'm going to keep my layers. So create color, and this is a Photoshop file. Save, click OK, and let's see what happens in Maya. I'm basically done with this. I'm going to go back to my Maya Classic. Press F to focus. And I'm going to assign a new material. Now, just to let you guys know, this has already a material and it's called Lambert 1. You never want to touch Lambert 1. Lambert 1 is the default gray. If I change and I'm just going to demonstrate what not to do. If I change this to, let's say yellow, any object that I create from now on will have that yellow, which is really bad. You don't want that. And what we want to do is assign a new shader to it. So this is called a shader. It's a sphere that you can kind of see the texture on it. These are the attributes. And if you don't see them, press Control A so that you can see the attributes. You'll see the cube shape, an initial group, and a Lambert. So what I'm going to do is assign a new material to it. I'm going to right click on it and then select all the way to the bottom. There's something that says Assign New Material. So one more time, this needs to be in object mode. Right click, Assign a New Material. There are several choices you can use. Maya 2020 uses what's called Arnold. Arnold is a type of renderer, and it also has a bunch of shaders. We are going to be using the basic one, which is called the AI Standard Surface. It's a long name, but basically it's the standard surface. It's a shader for every surface. So go ahead and click on AI Standard Surface. So over here, we have our AI Standard Surface, which now I'm going to call Create Shader. I should probably spell it correctly. There we go. And you'll notice that there's a bunch of attributes underneath this. We are just going to be focusing on the base and maybe a little bit of specularity, but right now let's focus on the base. So the first one is the weight. The weight just means how much of that texture do you want to see? The second one is the color. What color do you want this to be? So if I select the color and I change it to that yellow that we chose earlier, you'll notice that it changes, which is great. If I want to change it to something else, I'm more than welcome to choose whatever color, solid color I want. Now, this weight means that I only see 80% of that texture. If I want to crank it all the way to 1, we'll see 100% of that color. And the purpose is just to give you control. Instead of going back into Photoshop and changing the color over and over and over, if you're trying to make something darker, you can just grab the weight and that will make it darker. So let's pretend you have a whole environment and there is a lamp, and the lamp just seems to be really bright and you just don't know why, and it's just not working with you. You can always take the weight and just kind of reduce it to make it darker. Things like that. Okay, so why are we doing this? Well, let's go to color and we're going to click on this little checker right here, which is basically a connection. And we're going to click on that little tiny checker, and it's going to give us a list of nodes to play with. We are looking for file because we have a file that we want to attach it. So I'm going to go to File, and then it gives you a File tab, which is basically a file node. And over here, you'll see Image Name. You're going to click on that tiny little folder, and notice where we're located. We're located in Create Source Images. Maya will always look for textures first in source images. Now this is where I put my final images. My working file is located under images. So clicking up on that blue little arrow, which will take you up the folder, we can go into images, and here is my Create Color PSD. I'm going to double click on that, and you're going to see that nothing's really happened. Well, you have to press on the number 6 on your keyboard. Your mouse has to be hovering over the perspective window and press the number 6. Looks black, but if I turn around, there it is. My smiley face is upside down, and there is my other texture. So the good news is that it's working. Unfortunately, this is upside down, but that's okay. At least now I understand that it's upside down, and I'll be able to fix it in the texture. So now that we know how to attach a texture to it, I am going to save File Save Scene As because I'm worried that something horrible is going to happen. I'm going to save version 2, and I am going to call this Start Texture. Okay, great. So you can see my UVs, which you really need to hide, but right now, at least it's working. So again, press the number 6. So 4 just means wireframe, 5 means shaded, 6 means texture. If you look up here at the top, you can see when I click 5, that little texture disappears, 6, it textures. So that's kind of like the shortcut. All right, I think that's a good place to stop. We have explored UV snapshots and also painted it in Photoshop. In the next tutorial, we're going to take our abstract art here and create it into something more realistic, like a wood barrel. So you can go ahead and start painting it and make it stylized. But if you want to make it photoreal, that is going to be in the next tutorial where we're going to create a photorealistic wood crate. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you guys have any questions by leaving a comment below. And also don't forget to like and share. I would really appreciate it if you guys would share this with your friends, family. And also don't forget to take a look at academicphoenixplus.com. That is where you can find free downloads free ebooks, and free tutorials just for you. So please take a look at academicphoenixplus.com. Thank you again for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I will see you next time.